Hello and welcome to another edition of USISPF Conversation, and a special edition that too, because we're looking at INDUS-X to kind of give an overview of what's in store in the future ahead for the U.S.-India partnership through the defense and technological perspective. I'm delighted to be joined by my guest today, Dr. Joe Felter from the Gaudi Knott Center and the Hoover Institution.
Great to be here, Akshobh. Thanks for the chance to join you.
Perfect. So at the outset, this is only the third edition of the INDUS-X. It, of course, was launched last year during Prime Minister Modi's iconic state visit. Beyond all the pomp and show of a state visit, there's a lot of policy and substance that comes about, right? And this is one of those things that's got policy and substance. So, Joe, as someone who served in government and now out of it, and someone who's seen US-India relations and worked on it as well, what was the thinking that went about that fructified into ISED and subsequently INDUS-X?
Well, thanks for the chance to be here, Akshobh. I mean, it's a really exciting time for U.S.-India relations in general, and arguably the U.S.-India defense cooperation is a real driver for the overall relationship. So this INDUS-X is a great example of the importance that both the United States and India place in building those defense relations, the types of technology cooperation that we're going to need to really realize the full potential of this relationship. So I think we have a shared vision for the future, and a strong India, independent India, with assuming its natural place in the region is in not just in the India's interest, it's in the U.S. interest, and I would say it's in every country's interest that wants to see the region remain free and open, and the rules-based order persists. So we need to build those defense relationships. We need to build India's defense capabilities, and that's really what's the motivation, I think, for this. And it goes both ways. We're partners. We can certainly benefit from this cooperation, but it's a really exciting time. I think in the Cold War, we prevailed in that conflict decades ago. I teach at Stanford, and my students get glassy-eyed when I talk about the Cold War. Might as well be World War I or something long ago. But I was around for that, and we won that war. But the types of defense technology that we used to prevail in that conflict were big, large end systems, aircraft carriers, submarines, fighter jets, things that were, the technology really developed out of government labs, big defense primes. But the technology we're going to need to prevail in current conflicts, to prevent, deter, and war, and then win wars that we're forced to get into. The defense technology that we're going to need to prevail in those conflicts, it's going to originate in the commercial technology base. So now more than ever before, we have this extraordinary need to be able to identify, adopt, and deploy those military relevant technologies at speed and scale. And that's what we're all about here. That's what IDEX is about. That's what organizations like the Defense Innovation Unit, its Indian counterpart, IDEX, we're set up to try to help both our countries identify and adopt those technologies that are originating in the commercial technology base, better, faster, quicker. And in this case, two close partners, the world's largest and oldest democracies working together to achieve shared vision. We're cooperating in military technology cooperation is going to be really critical. And INDUS-X is just a great example of how this happened. And I can keep going a bit. The history of that really goes way back. I'd say you could start even further back, but maybe back as far as 2015, when the U.S. and India became major defense partners, and that's a designation that the United States only has with its closest allies, like in NATO, and so that's now India as a major defense partner. Great progress since then. We've concluded four of those key defense enabled agreements, if you will. And I think this audience knows the acronyms, but the LAMOA, the COMCASA, the ISA, the BECA. So the conditions are set for us to be able to cooperate, to share this technology. There's challenges. Our respective bureaucracies aren't making this easier. I think both sides can do better, and that's why we're here, to find those opportunities to improve the efficiencies and expand the breadth, depth, and scope of our defense cooperation through technology, and specifically commercial technologies that are really going to drive our competitive advantages going forward.
Yeah, BECA, COMCASA, LAMOA, and we had the SOSA agreement signed recently when Defense Minister Rajnath Singh visited Washington recently. Joe, you touched on major defense partner in 2016. And before I get to INDUS-X, just the evolution of this partnership, right? Just under 30 years ago, India barely opened up its economy and just about. And people forget, well, the US India relation may be a 77-year story, but it's a little more than the 30-year story because India went from aid to trade and ergo estrangement to engagement. And not too long ago, you had nuclear sanctions imposed by the Clinton administration for India testing weapons. And then you had President Bush, signing a civil nuclear deal, then major defense partner, and now you had a state visit and you had ICE at INDUS-X. So it's hard to see where this relationship is going to go. But if I were to ask you to wear your academic hat and policy hat and play suits here, where does the relationship go from here?
Well, let me put my academic hat on. I teach international relations here at Stanford and taught at Columbia and at our U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And a real fundamental premise driving leading international relations there is that states cooperate based out of shared interest. And I think the U.S. and India absolutely have shared interests. We have a shared vision for the future. We want to see this region remain free and open, this rules-based order persist. And let's call out the elephant in the room. We look at the disturbing actions of countries like China that we think threaten those shared interests. And I would argue that China has a very different vision for the future that is not shared by either the United States or India. So we're cooperating based on shared interests, but also in getting away from pure academia, I'd say we have shared values too. That's we're the world's oldest and largest democracies. So I think it's a combination of these shared interests and these shared values intersecting to create great conditions for cooperation. And I hope we don't squander this opportunity because, as you mentioned, Akshobh, it wasn't always like this. Just a few decades ago, which with my gray hairs, I remember that time when the U.S.-India relationship was not where it is today. So let's take advantage of that and let's advance our mutual interest and let's work together to make to realize this vision for the future that I think both our countries share and I think like-minded countries across the region and beyond share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I say, the elephant in the room is the dragon. That's the one thing with the Unite Squad and I do you too in some ways. Joe, you're based in Stanford, West Coast. Stanford, of course, epitomizes not just one of America's best or West Coast best, one of the global best in technology. And Silicon Valley has been codified as for disruption, innovation, a place that sees daylight last, but where innovation first see light of day. But even this is new for Stanford and Silicon Valley that once that was seen far away from Washington and Wall Street, now is playing a central part in decision making and critical national security issues, which from your days in Washington, you may not have thought of when you first got into the policy side of things. But now that you're an academic on the West Coast and still dealing with very Washingtonian views, how has this evolution come about?
Yeah, well, if you know the history, but I co-teach a class at Stanford called Hacking for Defense, and my co-teacher is a gentleman named Steve Blank, who's pretty well known in the startup community, associated with helping develop the lean startup movement. He's got a great history. It's called the secret history of Silicon Valley. And the truth is, it's kind of back to the future. It really is. Silicon Valley was driven by military tech companies way back in the 50s. That was really what kind of established and built Silicon Valley. So we're kind of returning to that in some ways. Not to sound crass, there's a lot of great patriots out here, but there's a lot of opportunities to profit now. And as I mentioned earlier, the military relevant technologies that we're going to need to compete going forward against competitors, for example, China, it's being developed in the commercial technology space. So there is a huge influx in what we call dual use venture capitalist firms, and a lot of them are going to be joining us here at INDUS-X. Some great ones, and you'll see them. I don't want to mention one and forget a few, but this notion that commercial technology has military relevant applications is driving a lot of opportunities. Where the Defense Department in both our countries, the Ministry of Defense and Defense Department, they need to identify, adopt those technologies. They need to have access to it in the commercial technology space. So Silicon Valley and certainly the tech hubs, Bangalore and other places in India are becoming very relevant. And actually, let me just give a big shout out to given this is an India audience here largely. Silicon Valley, our companies here, are large. I would say over half. I don't have the statistic of our startups and our tech companies are either founded, co-founded, or have senior management or coming from India, either Indian citizens or Indian descent. So India's we're very familiar with India here in Silicon Valley. The incredible education system you have, the quality of your engineers, It's no surprise that the Indian presence in here in Silicon Valley is well ensconced. And even at my own university, Stanford, many Indian students here who are just extraordinary. We joke that the Indians that couldn't get into the IITs come to Stanford and Harvard, MIT as a consolation. We know how hard it is to get into those schools.
That's not untrue at all. And I always say I came from an IIT family, but the brain stopped with me. So the place in Indian purgatory. No, it's very interesting you say that, Joe, because I would remember my Indian education. I always joked it was ABC H1B because the whole idea was the Indian excellence would get into a STEM education and then come to the United States. So in some ways, long before I said in INDUS-X, there was already a tech synergy indirectly between the US and India because India produced engineers by the droves. But because of the United States tech ecosystem, that's where they flourish, which is why all the CEOs that you mentioned, a lot of them on the board of USISPF of Indian origin, had their intellectual moorings and groundings in India, but the grad school and PhDs in the United States and led American companies. So, which is why high skilled immigration is so valuable. But I wanted to ask you this, Joe. The theme says harnessing investment opportunities to enhance cross-border defense innovation ecosystems. What's a 30,000 foot view of what's in store right now?
We're going to bring an amazing group, certainly our government leaders from both U.S. and India. We have investors, we have technology startups, we have established companies, primes. We're just bringing in all the players, if you will, in the defense innovation ecosystem coming together. We're going to we will hear from our government officials about the challenges that our respective countries face, either individually or collectively, and those needs and how technology can help address those challenges. The fuel to get those technologies developed and deployed is going to come from a lot of our investors. So everyone's coming together. Everyone has a role, and we're going to have a very candid conversations with the objectives of identifying those unrealized opportunities to really leverage and harness this defense technology ecosystem, both on the U.S. and Indian side, to greater effect. I mean, the stakes are just too high. We are in a competition, if you will, strategic competition with great powers that don't have a shared vision that I argue that U.S. and India share. And to be honest with you, I want our vision, our shared vision, to prevail. And to do that, we're going to have a strong defense, collective defense. And to get there, we're going to have to really increase our technology sharing, certainly in the defense space. And this INDUS-X is a great effort towards those ends, bringing everyone together, getting those tough conversations, those important conversations going in a great place here at Stanford. And we'll hopefully, we'll go back and make some progress in this all important relationship through defense technology cooperation.
Yeah, brings me to my penultimate question. Speaking of bringing everyone together, this is startups and VCs and academics and private sector companies across an eclectic mix. Joe, from your time looking at policy from the government days, there was never a concept of startups and VCs suddenly sitting at the table and being part of national security conversation. So from their perspective, foreign policy and diplomacy, when we studied the Cold War, looked like something between presidents, heads of states, bureaucrats, ministers. But now these people are now actively at the table, forming some part of foreign policy, some part of national security. That's a pretty fascinating evolution.
Yeah, and that's going to continue. I mean, the impact that these technology companies can have on world events, is unparalleled and only increasing. Let's bring everyone to the table. Those voices need to have a place at the table. Our government leaders need to sit with our business and technology leaders. And again, INDUS-X is a great example of trying to make that effort. And again, if I just a plug for those that came before us and made this possible. Really early vision by our former Defense Secretary Ash Carter. Rest in peace. My academic advisor at Harvard. Worked with his counterparts to get this off the ground with the major defense partnership. My boss in the Pentagon, Secretary Jim Mattis, who came over for the first 2+2 with Secretary Pompeo meeting with his counterparts. And I guess it was the first 2+2 ever for India. And we concluded this memorandum of understanding between DIU and INDUS-X, for example. This is back when I believe Raj Shah was the DIU director, and then Mike Brown, and now, of course, Doug Beck. But this is a great trajectory. But as you said, actually, we can't separate the players. It's no longer we sit out here in Silicon Valley and try to build profitable companies and let Washington do its thing. We're too intertwined, too interconnected. And again, INDUS-X is a great example of the effort to make sure we bring all those relevant voices and stakeholders to the table so we can make effective policy and really advance our interests, our mutual interests effectively.
Too interconnected. That's a form of technology transfer right there. Joe, as an avid Trekkie, as a Star Trek fan, I have to ask: is space the final frontier? Given now we're seeing privatization of Indian space companies, so why shoot for the stars? When India's landing on the moon and space. This whole idea of collaborating on space, it's existed in NASA and ISRO, but now with space sector companies coming and being a very critical part of the INDUS-X conversation. Couldn't have fathomed this when we were watching Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek.
Well, I love a fellow Trekkie to join here. I can say I maybe saw those in the original run, so as a kid. So absolutely, I mean, I certainly not the final frontier. It's certainly frontier where we have tremendous opportunities and we're making tremendous gains right now, and certainly India is playing a significant role. And the partnerships in the space domain are just huge, and we are leveraging them. We'll be talking about that here in the next couple of days at INDUS-X. But yeah, I think it's a great example of a frontier where cooperation between U.S. and India and other key allies and partners can really have huge returns on that investment, and certainly an area where India is just a recognized leader in this field, and I'm really excited about both what we're doing now and what we can do going forward as far as cooperation in space.
Well, Joe, apropos of Star Trek, live long and prosper. Thank you so much.